Every year since 1989, the Library of Congress has selected 25 films to add to the National Film Registry. The criteria? The films must be culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
Each week on You're Missing Out, we take a look at one of these films to try and get to the heart of why they were selected and why they still matter.
This week, Amanda Rush is in the guest seat to talk about Carmen Jones.
Our guest today is our social media manager and also the voice you have heard on every single episode this season, much to the confusion of some of our returning guests of the past who were thrown off all of a sudden, hearing a very different voice than mine reading these registry statements. But now they are here to talk about a full film. Amanda Rush is here to talk about Carmen Jones. Amanda, thanks for
doing your job. I don't know.
Being here in full now. Pulling back the curtain a bit. You know, all your registry statements were pre-recorded in one massive recording session. So for the listener, you've been here the whole time. But for us, you have not been on microphone with us since the week before the Academy Awards this year.
Yep.
Yeah. The last, to give folks just a frame of reference, the last time we were all on mic with Amanda, we were all very confident that Lily Gladstone was winning Best Actress. Just to put it in context here, we were all thinking that. Yeah.
Was I maybe the only one that was like, listen, she's probably going to win, but if they're going to be dickheads, this is going to be the category they do a dickhead move. I feel like I might have, I can't remember. Again, maybe I'm doing the hindsight thing, but I feel like I might have been the one that's like, I think you guys are giving Kill the Flower Moon a little too much love. I don't think any, I don't know, whatever. It's fine.
Anyway.
What won over Lily Gladstone again?
Emma Stone for Poor Things.
Oh.
And then she got
I
up.
can't be mad at that.
And then she got up and made a speech where she seemed to go, guys, I'm sorry. I know, guys, I get it. I'm sorry.
Hey, listen, you know what? Can't be mad at it.
No, it's not a bad performance. Anyway, we're getting off track. We should also note we're not all on mic. Kyle is not here for this. I know things popped up. We can't all be in the same space at the same time, apparently. But that is why if folks are listening to this or watching this, we don't have Kyle's fancy software, so we're doing this on a Google Meet. In case anybody is just like, it's a little different. That's where we're at. But
if they got a problem, they can ask for a refund.
Do we get paid? No.
No.
I wish you hadn't done that. We could have created this imaginary lore that Kyle and I actually hate each other, and that's why we're never on the show at the same time. Missed our chance.
But you have been, obviously, you've been on the show before. You know, we've had you on just as a regular old guest. And then, you know, you've joined the team this season, and we tend to do this thing every year where typically the last episode of the season is just us circling the wagon. You know, the past two seasons, the final episode was Kyle kind of being our guest for the episode, you know, and us doing that. And coming with all the fabulous perks of getting to make a registry pick at the end of the episode, a thing that, I don't know, it's not really much of a privilege. Anybody can submit films to the registry. This is doing nothing, but it's fun for us. So since you joined the team,
fun, he says.
Oh, no, Mr. White Line Fever. You don't get to pretend that it's not fun for you.
No. Listen,
you scallywag.
Hey, listen, all right. I'm of two minds. I can and I can't complain about this. One, it's more work for me, so I can complain. Two, I can't complain because I came up with this idea. This formatting idea was my problem, and I made it for myself, and now I have to sleep in this filthy, half-made bed that I've made because I'm a dumb fuck.
In any event,
I'm like Harry Belafonte in the dating world. Just a dumb fucking idiot. Just like, hey, this is a good idea, and then being led down. What?
I'm gonna ask, because remember we talk about this, Tom, with YouTube, things could be clipped out of context. You should clarify that you are referring to the character Harry Belafonte plays in Carmen Jones, and you are not besmirching the legacy of one of America's great music stars and civil rights activists.
Hey, he could be a civil rights activist and have a bad dating history, man.
I actually don't know.
Insult on the man.
I'll be real. I don't know anything about Harry Belafonte.
He was an actor and a musician from the 50s. He probably, oh God, his black book is probably the size of a phone book.
Well, actually,
since our demographic is not the people who also read People magazine, I did do some research about that, but we should talk about it offline.
Oh, for sure. But I will just say, because Tom says his, it must have been a phone book. There was a note that I took watching this movie that just said Harry Belafonte taking his shirt off in the 50s must have melted brains in the cinema. There must have been at least a couple people who were like, "Oh, all right then."
Bro was married 3 times in his life. So you know what? That guy, he got around. Let's be real here. Let's be real. None of them was a Carmen Jones, but guy, which
we should be thankful for. But that all leads us to the fact that obviously, Amanda, you are here to talk Carmen Jones. This is your episode this season, and we are excited to do it. So to sort of kick things off, before I get to Tom and I, Amanda, what was your familiarity with? Had you heard of this film before we started this season? What was your familiarity with, obviously, Carmen Jones, Carmen, Dorothy Dandridge, Harry Belafonte, the whole package? Where were you at before we started this?
I grew up with Harry Belafonte songs sometimes playing at family occasions and parties. Was not familiar with the film specifically, but once we were doing the pre-taping of my voice at the beginning of all of these episodes, realizing that it was a adaptation of Carmen. I am a big opera fan. I go to the Kennedy Center at least a couple of times a year to see what they're doing, and just a couple of seasons ago they put on Carmen and I went to go see it. It was my first time seeing it live. But in terms of Carmen Jones, I was going into that pretty blind in terms of what to expect.
Tom, what about you? What was your familiarity with? Had you heard of Carmen Jones at all prior to us starting the season? Okay.
No, this was one of the ones that we get through a lot in the show. Didn't know about it. Didn't know anything about it. Nothing. Blah blah blah. So it's just I like to go in blind, and I knew about Harry Belafonte was, through I don't think I'd seen any movies he'd done before this, but like I knew him as a musician and as an activist, any of the plethora of documentaries about American history and civil rights, blah blah blah. Harry Belafonte comes up and whatnot. Obviously, as the kind of guy in my aesthetic, I grew up watching Beetlejuice, so I definitely heard Harry Belafonte music a lot in my youth, like the 2 songs, but still influential. Who can ever forget being a young boy and watching Winona Ryder floating about with Harry Belafonte singing? But yeah, I had no idea what this was. Did not know it was musical. Did not know it was based off of Carmen. I mean, I kind of I figured out the Carmen thing pretty quickly, even though for like a minute or two, it's like, this is familiar. What is this? What's happening? It's like the music's like she starts. I'm just like, this sounds so familiar. What is this? Why am I okay? Oh, it's Carmen Jones. But yeah, knew nothing and was able to just let it wash over me, which is easier now in my sort of new musical appreciation phase of life. So yeah, first time, and glad I watched it. Although, nothing to besmirch the movie or anything. I really liked it a lot. It is just it's one of those movies we kind of come across where we go, really? This movie this early?
Oh well, there's a reason for that.
No. I'm sure we're gonna get to that, but you watch it and you go like, this is the 4th season, and what, the 5th musical we've done, and you go, huh? Well, so that's interesting.
I can speak to that a little bit. Because of my first exposure to this film, which is, the first note I took from the beginning of this was, I feel like Carmen Jones was much more prominent 30 years ago. I feel like, I talk a lot on the show about being enmeshed in like that, in the 90s when all the theme parks and all the textbooks and all were doing the magic of the movies stuff, right? And how many Bravo and Turner Classic and A&E and AMC specials would just be like clip shows of movies. And I feel like I saw Carmen Jones come up a lot 30 years ago. And it's one of those things that was treated as canonical then and sort of fell out of the canon in some regard. And I think part of the reason for that is the fact that it, in a way, it's important to remember that like this comes out in the 50s, right? And it is Otto Preminger using all of his cachet to make a big studio musical with an all-black cast where, spoilers for the game we play at the end, it gets the first ever Best Actress nomination for a black performer.
It's fine. I'm not going to remember that.
That's fine. But I'm saying like it was a big to-do, and it is not stereotypical or denigrating or anything like that. It doesn't have the baggage of other prominent black characters in film history up until that point, right? It doesn't have the baggage of Hattie McDaniel.
Or even like doesn't have the baggage of even like a West Side Story.
Right.
Because there is none of that, like, oh, hey, like we got white people playing black the way that movie had. Hey, we got a really, really white people playing Puerto Ricans.
Yeah.
It's like, I
don't
know.
But what I mean is, I don't think but it wasn't canonized just because of being a musical. I think the musical didn't matter so much as I feel like, that thing that would happen. We're all children of the 90s, right? And there was that thing, particularly in how we learned American history and cultural history, where you kind of felt like there was always, like when you would go see, when like even as simple as like every kids cartoon or like a Burger King Kids Club or whatever would be like, yeah, okay, don't worry. It's not all white people. We have the one black character and the one Asian. And yeah, of course, the one black character is always going to be holding a basketball and he's tall and look like Kid and Play. And the one Asian kid is always going to have one streak of color in their hair and holding a calculator. But it's the 90s, so this is a step forward. And like now we look at that and go, oh God, right? But similarly to, and I evoke this because a movie that we now absolutely do not talk about anymore. It's in the registry, but nobody talks about. On the other side of that, when I would be reading books as a kid and they would bring up Carmen Jones, they would in the same conversation bring up Flower Drum Song, which is another like big musical movie, but with an all Asian cast, predominantly Asian cast, whose big selling point at the time was like, no, but Asian people are playing it themselves now, you see, which again feels insane. But like now, of course, we have made such progress. You know what I'm saying? Like we've made such progress that people talking about film history and the contributions of people to film history do not need to lean on exclusively Carmen Jones or Flower Drum Song, right? And it would be extraordinarily reductive to do that. And by the 90s, it was reductive to do that anyway, right? But, in the 90s, when you're writing film history for the general public, a lot of the black-led films of the 60s and 70s and kind of the Asian American film revolution of the 80s and 90s in indie film are all kind of still too hot button for mainstream culture to be willing to put out there. You know what I mean? Like there's still that edge to it at the time where this stuff feels a little dangerous. Now, of course, when you're watching like a retrospective of film history, even then they still kind of go with like the semi-safer choices, right? But I do feel like, particularly Carmen Jones, which I think is an exceptional film, but it also had the thing of it was a mainstream accepted film that wasn't denigrating, but that also wasn't controversial by the 90s, by the 80s and 90s. So it sort of got tokenized, right? In the same way that, like, again, in a 90s childhood education, your school would go, there was the civil rights movement, which had Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, and we will not talk about anyone else, and we're moving on. It's a similar thing that kind of, I think Carmen Jones got treated in the film history side. Like you'd see it mentioned, not depicted in an animatronic, but you'd see it like pop up in the Great Movie Ride at MGM Studios for them to go,
God.
see, we put somebody in there.
I would lose my mind if there was an animatronic of Harry Belafonte strangling Carmen Jones. That would make me a theme park guy. If there was an animatronic of him bug-eyed going, well, you said you'd love me to the end.
Amanda, the best thing is the Great Movie Ride comes up a lot on this podcast because I was a theme park kid. Tom was not. And what's fun is he never remembers that this comes up, which means like 5 times over the course of this show, we've gotten to see Tom's baffled reaction that on a Disney park ride for families, after you see like Singing in the Rain and Mary Poppins, they just take you in the Nostromo and the xenomorph from Alien just drops down and tries to kill you while a terrified robot Ripley holds a laser gun in the corner. It's a thing that even now when you watch it, you go, how did this feels incongruous to everything else we've been doing.
Well, Ripley is officially a Disney princess, so
this is true. Absolutely,
it all tracks. Alien Romulus comes out next week.
I guess Disney owns Carmen Jones too, right? Because that was a 20th Century Fox. Well, 20th Century Fox at least distributed it. I think this was like a semi-independent thing that Preminger did.
Production company Otto Preminger Films, distributed.
So maybe, I don't know how that worked because that was that weird. We'll get into the weird cachet that he had, but I kind of just wanted to talk about, obviously the space that this film occupies, this very particular lane that it has.
It's wild though because it's obviously revolutionary for back then because like I said, we're very lucky there wasn't at least one character in this movie that was just clearly some white guy in shoe polish where you just go, oh, why'd you have to make that decision? But even like watching it now, you go, yeah, we really don't get this. Like we got The Color Purple last year, but nobody really cared.
Well, it's also
like you did.
I'm sorry, you said.
No, it's just one of those things that really does bring home like the discussions of, diversity and who gets portrayed in film when you see a movie that was pretty crazy for the 1950s of, hey, we're making a musical that's an all-black cast that's also an adaptation of an older story, so changing it to black characters today would mean like 1,000 YouTubers would make like $10,000 a month railing about how Carmen Jones is woke. But like just seeing that like dichotomy and how like things really in a lot of ways still haven't changed because you think about like it wasn't a musical, but like Crazy Rich Asians felt like a moment where everyone's like, wow, we're doing this, like we're taking steps and we can make a movie with Asians that's not just kung fu fighting and all of this stuff, and it's just a domestic comedic romantic movie. Big moment. Good thing that they did those sequels. Really caught fire, guys. Good job.
Those sequels, I mean, Tom, because it made too much. It made way too much money to not make the sequels. It would be absurd.
Listen, that's the thing. Crazy Rich Asians 3 is still playing. That is why there's only the only screens are Deadpool and Wolverine, Inside Out 2, and Craziest Rich Asians. I don't know what the
critically acclaimed, made a ton of money. There's no way they wouldn't sequelize it.
No, but so like you have having that moment and then seeing how like we just really haven't capitalized or done anything like that since then, because like I said, Color Purple really didn't do much for like critical acclaim or just people talking about it. It did all right, but like people kind of like, I just there.
But I would
everyone just ignored West Side Story. That Spielberg's like, hey, we're going to kind of reclaim West Side Story and kind of try to get rid of that the brown face shit that kind of taints that movie, whether irregardless of your feelings or not. I like the movie, not as much as you, I know that, but like I watch it, but even I just have to go like,
it's rough.
These are some white ass people.
But that's the thing that's also striking about Carmen Jones is the fact that even if you were trying to make Carmen Jones today, there would still be studio heads going, you can't make one of them white. Like there's got to be, like, even now we know people. We're not going to name names.
Can't
We're
we get
not
a
gonna
Paul
name names.
Mescal in this?
Yeah.
As
Well,
like an audience surrogate.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, you and I both know people firsthand who have gone to meetings with scripts for people, for a certain group, and have gotten the note saying, there has to be, can you make one of these characters white? Like, you can have X number of black leads or Latino leads or Asian leads, but can you make one of the friends white? Can you make one of the, sorry, Amanda, you were starting to say something or no?
Yeah, oh, yes. Continue. Yeah. We talk a lot. I don't want to talk anymore.
Well, before we get much further and we completely expel Tom's energy and the film, do we want to have me, as a disembodied voice, read out the description of the registry?
Absolutely. So
Go for
before
it.
we get any further into what we have to say about Carmen Jones, let's hear what the National Film Registry had to say. Here's what the Library of Congress had to say about Carmen Jones.
In 1943, Oscar Hammerstein Jr. took Georges Bizet's opera Carmen, rewrote the lyrics, changed the characters from 19th century Spaniards to World War II era African Americans, switched the locale to a southern military base, and the result was Carmen Jones. Otto Preminger directed this Cinemascope retelling starring Dorothy Dandridge as the temptress Carmen, a worker in a war plant, and Harry Belafonte as her soldier lover. Although both Dandridge and Belafonte were singers, their opera voices were dubbed by Marilyn Horne and Laverne Hutcherson. Otto Preminger's realist sensibility often seemed contradictory to the whimsical nature of a musical, but some strong elements survive the segregationist context. Exceptionally liberal in its time, Dorothy Dandridge's performance in the lead is a reminder of the kind of African-American films that might have emerged if given the chance.
We often like to bag on the registry statements, but I do think that's such an interesting way to close it out. That might have emerged if given the chance. And it ties into, earlier this season, a couple episodes ago, Tom, we did Salt of the Earth. And talked about, like, it's maybe not the best film from a structural standpoint.
No.
It's a bit of a rough watch sometimes, but it is a thing that you watch and get that sense, like we talked about, of like, man, if the Red Scare hadn't happened, and if this film hadn't gotten blacklisted, what does American independent cinema look like? And similarly here, like, this is a case of, it is remarkable to watch. Like I said, you don't see a single, white character in the movie. The material's taken very seriously. It's not, I mean, I don't know Oscar Hammerstein's Carmen Jones very well, but I know that when Otto Preminger got on board, he was not happy with the way that the writing was. And my guess is some of that was like what Otto Preminger later makes a Porgy and Bess movie, which groundbreaking musical for its time, but like to try and read those lyrics now and the attempt at vernacular English that Porgy and Bess tries to do is jarring now. I mean, there was a whole thing when they did the Broadway revival like a decade or so ago where they were like, yeah, we're taking out some of these I loves you porgies kind of things. Like, this is it's way too many mentions of catfish. Like, we got to maybe scale this back. Mm-hmm. Noble for its time. Like, George Gershwin wasn't trying to do anything offensive, but you feel like Preminger at the very least is like, we're not really going to make people talk like that. We're not really going to do this that way. And just, I don't know, it is a remarkable thing of, yeah, like we talk about Oscar Micheaux and watching his films or any of that and being like, oh man, imagine if black directors got to make films the same way that, like, when you watch a Lois Weber movie, right? Or you watch any, and you're like, man, imagine if they let women direct after the silent era, for sure. But also there is just the element of like, imagine if there were more guys like Otto Preminger who were like, yes, I am going to give a black woman the role of her career, an exceptional role. I'm going to believe in this person who prior to this was basically just doing like little Soundies shorts and popping up at an Abbott and Costello movie. uncredited role, Tom, if you don't remember her, but she is in an Abbott and Costello movie.
They all kind of run together. So
I think it's called Ride 'em Cowboy or something, or Ride 'em something.
Oh, that's like towards the end. So,
Ride 'em Cowboy, yeah. It's an uncredited role in that, and then like an uncredited singer role in the Marx Brothers Day at the Races.
Okay, so good for her. She got to work with the boys. That's good.
And otherwise doing these fascinating things called Soundies, which were like 3-minute music videos that were made on 16 millimeter for video jukeboxes, which I did not know was a thing. That like in the 40s, you could just go into your juke joint and put on old timey music videos.
Just portable TRL,
right? Now you might be wondering, guys. Mike, did you
what
watch
is TRL?
What if there was a 1940s Carson Daly just being like, I'm up next? But yeah,
Dick Clark.
I watched some of these Soundies, and if you were wondering, is Dorothy Dandridge good in them? Oh, she's terrific in them. Are they? Do they age well? No, not at all. Not
what a surprise! Thank God I'm sitting.
Truly, just because I put them together because I wanted to see like what was her career like before this. And the minute a title card comes up that goes, "It's the Jungle Jig," you went, "Oh no, nope, oh I don't."
I feel like maybe you probably shouldn't have even said that.
It's gonna be rough. It's gonna be rough. It's gonna be a tough one. But like that's an important. I think it's genuinely important context to remember that like at this point, everybody in this movie has had to endure these, quite frankly, like very degrading depictions, right?
Well, because isn't that just a continuation of the discussion, like you said, from the Salt of the Earth about what would cinema be if, all these people got the chances, and it really just comes down to the Hollywood system at the time wouldn't have allowed it, so you needed somebody like an Otto Preminger to kind of just be able to swing his dick around and just be like, nah, it's all black people. Like, what are you gonna do? Don't you come at me, like, try to stop me. It's gonna happen. And that kind of even just goes to like this, what I was saying before of how it's so wild that even with all these discussions about this shit, that the studios try to prop up and make themselves look like they're progressive, but they're not. Independent cinema, even still, like, has its little bag of tricks it has to pull to get black casts, and we decry it a lot. We talk about like remember a few years ago where everyone kind of just kind of threw their fucking hands in the air and said, a fucking Harriet Tubman movie, motherfucker. And it's just like we just like everybody all at once was just like, we're done with this, for the love of God, do other things.
Because it was a fascinating thing at the time where, like, I remember the discussion around that kind of being like, you had people there, like, I remember there being an exchange where hearing one person kind of go like, aren't we past this? The fact that you're still doing movies about Harriet Tubman. And then somebody else responded going, do you know there hasn't been a theatrical Harriet Tubman biopic? Like, do you understand that it's not a case of like, oh, we're stuck in the past. It's people going, shit, guys, do you know that like, we need to get caught up on this? Like, we just haven't done these at all. You just couldn't do it. Nobody wanted to greenlight it. And it's like that conflict of kind of, again, like talking about this, because it's important to remember too, it's easy to look at this movie as a step forward, and it is. But it's also an anomaly insofar as like Dorothy Dandridge has a career afterward, but it's not like she's, she doesn't get the career, quite frankly, she deserves off of a film like this. Most of the rest of the cast, like oh my goodness, the actress's name escapes me now. Who plays Olga James, who plays Cindy Lou, who like pops the minute she's on screen. And you look at it and go, she just never got to do a movie again. Right? Like a lot of these people,
I have maybe this is just my mind making connections that it shouldn't be there. But do you? No. Her name is Cindy Lou. Do you think there's like when designing Cindy Lou Who that like Rankin and Bass, what the fuck?
Rankin and
Whoever
Bass.
did the Grinch, yeah, the Grinch cartoon, or even Dr. Seuss, like she looks like Cindy Lou Who.
I mean, I think that they're both playing off of a similar iconography, right?
But like,
I'm not saying
am I
it's
wrong
like,
though?
no, but I think it's important to remember that like we're talking about an era where that name, like that kind of like Cindy Lou thing, sort of carried with it a certain cliche to it. Like it's a very obviously nobody is named. I don't know, nobody. Most people are not named Cindy Lou anymore, right? But it's kind of like how if you named like think about it this way: if you named a character Melvin, the costumer already knows. Yeah, no, I know. I know what they're supposed to look like. You know what I mean? Like there's certain names where like once you name a character that everybody's like, I believe me, I know what we're doing costume wise for this. Okay. Doesn't, so I think it's in that regard, but the fact that this cast didn't get these opportunities after this film, I mean, obviously Harry Belafonte does. Not even, but like Harry Belafonte is a bigger star than the rest, but that's partly because he is the musical star that he is. He is the undeniable, pop culture force. And also, even then, like a lot of the stuff that he gets to do is because, like, think about it. Harry Belafonte gets like Buck and the Preacher, which is the idea of like Buck and the Preacher is kind of like, this is maybe the weird way to put it, but it's kind of like for black actors of the 60s, that's heat, right? It's like, it's Belafonte, Poitier on screen together. And you go, cool. What about getting a third prominent black actor? And Hollywood in the 60s goes, we don't have one.
Are there any?
We've got two. We are like, you can, and you almost feel like the studio system is like, we don't know how this happened, honestly, but there are two of them. So you get them in the same movie. Like it's a crazy thing. And the fact that they were, I mean, Belafonte and Poitier obviously were friends in real life as well. And then had a falling out. That's all, that happened around the time of In the Heat of the Night. It's a whole to do. It's not really worth getting into that now. But it is just an interesting thing to look at. Because I guess the thing is like a lot of times when we talk about movies where it's like, oh, what could have been? It's like Salt of the Earth, where it's like a scrappy indie. From the minute this thing starts with this massive tracking shot following the bus, it feels genuinely like you look at Preminger, Otto Preminger, and you feel like he not just a movie, but like it's Cinemascope. You feel like he pulled off a heist.
No, but that's what I mean. It's like this is what cinema was made to be, like big, colorful, loud, entertaining, not realistic. It's a fucking musical. It's not realistic, like whatever. This really does, but it feels like the opposite of Salt of the Earth, because I feel like Salt of the Earth actually did have a tangible impact that if it wasn't for a movie like that setting up the groundwork for guys like Cassavetes and Romero and all of them, who knows what independent cinema would have been like if that didn't happen. Whereas this, like you said, this is an anomaly. This movie does not. I mean, yes, we could probably point to like, oh, it impacted this or impacted that in subtle ways or whatnot. But this isn't like a Rosetta Stone movie. This is, as you said, straight up just an anomaly. Preminger, just as much as a fucking scumbag as he was as a director, everybody fucking hated him, abusive asshole, all of that. But he said, why wouldn't I make it a movie with all black people? Like, what? Why not? I'm gonna do it, and I got all this clout, so let's fucking do it. And got Oscar nominations, and seemed to good movie. People liked it. All that. Nothing came of it. It's so fucking crazy. I mean, crazy in the sense of like I know it's stupid that it happened, but like I also like no, that tracks for that era because Hollywood is just bad and actually not good.
And it's also like it's the fact that it's a movie that. It's not just an all-black cast. It's the thing that, and maybe some people will disagree, but I think that to me, one thing that really struck me is it speaks to, or not speaks to, it actually achieves this thing where it manages to have an eroticism without being objectifying of any of the characters, right? You know,
Yes.
typically when you are dealing with minority characters of any kind and you're filming it through a traditional sort of white gaze, it can get very objectifying very fucking fast.
I mean, hell,
in a
there's
lot
that
of
whole
weird
fucking
ways.
scene where fucking Belafonte's just singing by the river with his shirt off, and you're like, oh, that could have been a bit, you know, upsetting sexually for, you know, like, oh,
and I think, yeah, you know, the thing that really struck me is when we first meet Dorothy Dandridge, when she first enters as Carmen Jones in that genuinely wildly ambitious tracking shot, that insane one.
Yeah.
Like, it's not until halfway through the scene that you realize this is a oneer. There's been no cuts. But the other thing is, like, he brings her in and there is nothing objectifying about it, but also everybody watching it does the Tex Avery, you know, wolf jaw dropping to the floor, tongue rolling out reaction. Yeah. Amanda, I notice you're nodding, so feel free to weigh in if you want to weigh in on that entrance.
I think that was just like a really fantastic scene. And also having the actual opera fresh in my mind. I loved it, you know, being able to juxtapose those. But I think it's just like the power of, you know, the presence that Dorothy Dandridge commands in this role. And also just good filmmaking where like we understand that we know exactly who she is. We know exactly who this character is before she even gets into the lyrics of the song, where she states it very plainly and very prophetically about where the story is likely going to go and how she's going to have an impact on Joe's life. Like I really loved that opening scene.
And good filmmaking is kind of the key here, because you would think, oh, it's easy, just get hot people and film them and it should be hot and sexy, right? Not the case. Case in point, I have Fast and Furious 7 on my TV right now, the least sexual franchise that has ever existed. A lot of attractive people, also Vin Diesel. There's not an ounce of sexual tension in that movie. I think Vin Diesel and fucking oh god, what's her name? Michelle Rodriguez. It feels like they've never even shook hands, let alone had a child together. Like, but
well, it's not her kid. It's Thor's wife, who they kill off with Charlize.
Elsa
Pataki.
Yeah.
Yes.
But in Fast 10, they keep going, oh, do you want to have a baby? Okay, thanks, Vin. But the filmmaking has to match the story, and the story here is one of passion going too far and kind of driving a man crazy and kind of driving a woman crazy in a sense. I mean, it's about passion. You have to feel the heat, and you know, smartly setting it in a very hot and sweaty locations, I should say, kind of helps. They're always sweating. Their sleeves are always rolled up, where she's in a very, like, you know, not revealing dress because it's, you know, still the 50s, but like, oh, she's got a lot of shoulder showing. She needs to breathe a little bit. It's fucking hot out. It helps. And plenty of filmmakers have had hot people, but sometimes you don't. If the casting's not right and the director isn't directing the cast right, that shit just ain't coming through. And you know, I mean, I'm sure I'll set Mike up for this tidbit. Otto Preminger sure did know that Dorothy Dandridge was a attractive old lady, did he not, Mike?
Yeah. So I'm assuming in your research, Amanda, you came across this about Preminger and Dandridge.
Oh yes, I came across a lot in my research.
Oh, well, we're gonna give you plenty of time to get into that. But I just found that really was one of those things that I was, you know, as I was reading about it, and I just like, well, at first he didn't think that Dorothy had the sultriness, and then you know, she sure showed him, but then she worried she couldn't carry it in the movie, and so she called him up and said, "I'm quitting the movie," and he said, "No, I'm coming to you. I'm going to come to your house and like talk you out of it." And that's when Dorothy Dandridge and that Kelly Savalas looking son of a bitch apparently just began like a long affair that ended when she realized he wasn't going to leave his wife for her. Just like, I do want to note, like, the more I read up on this, the more you're just like, oh, what a Tom, you know nothing about the Dandridge biography, right?
Nope.
Bleak is the only way to describe it. Like, just a deeply sad deeply sad story, which is just truly like on the backdrop of this movie in particular, where you're like, man, like why the hell? Even if like she couldn't get work right away, you're like, well, why the hell didn't somebody in like the late 60s, early 70s, in the new Hollywood era, why didn't somebody, give her a second chance? Or why didn't she have the career of like a Ruby Dee later in life or something? And you realize, oh, she didn't make it out of the 60s. She died at 42.
Jesus.
It was a miserable time. But obviously, Amanda, you mentioned all the research you did. I want you to speak to that, but I also just want to ask, before we even get into that, you talked about having just seen Carmen fairly recently.
Yes.
I haven't seen Carmen since I was a wee young one. So my memory of it is specious at best. And I'm going to take a shot in the dark. I could be wrong. Tom, I assume you have not gone to see the opera Carmen, nor have you seen like a production of Carmen. Like, what I'm getting at is no Giallo director ever did a production of Carmen that you would have watched, right?
Not that I am aware,
okay.
But the Italians did make a lot of movies, so
yeah.
I might have missed 1 or 10.
So before you even get into the research, I want to hear from you because you're much more familiar. What was that like, that contrast kind of comparing this film to the original opera for you?
So I think it's interesting because in the opera, obviously, you get swept up mostly in the music. Nowadays, when you go to the opera at the Kennedy Center, they have a nice screen up at the top that has basically closed caption, for lack of a better word, so you can keep up with what they're saying, and it's subtitled. But you get swept up in the emotion of just the songs and what they're singing more so than the story. So it was interesting actually watching this movie, this adaptation in English, and realizing that there were certain threads that I don't think that I necessarily realized sorry about that. These threads that I don't know stuck with me as much when I was actually watching the opera. So in the opera, Cindy Lou is actually a character named Michaela, and while she delivers a beautiful aria in the third act of the opera, it's like not something that sticks with you. Whereas throughout this whole movie, I am just dying for Cindy Lou to come back on screen. I want to see what that girl is thinking after Joe runs off with Carmen. I think it was really interesting just because of how much of the actual score was lifted from the opera or adapted from the opera in a way that I don't know that I expected going into this. I think when I heard this is an adaptation of Carmen, I thought maybe there would be some like little nuances to that, but I'm like, oh no, they just went right ahead and they took those songs and they adapted the lyrics, which was fun, but also I think jarring in a way that didn't let me focus the first watch on what was actually happening within the lyrics, within, the actions taking place in the scene, because I was like, yes, this is this song from the third act of the opera, with a few exceptions where in the first one, I think they really captivated me. And that was the first song that Pearl Bailey sings when they are in the nightclub. And I think part of it is because it's her voice. She's one of the vocalists who is not dubbed over in the film. And it's my favorite musical number in the entire musical, because there's something about it that feels a little bit more like homage to the original source material, but still feels like it almost feels like it was written specifically for her to perform specifically like that. And then I'm going to forget what his character's name is because it's so different from the boxer. What is his name?
Yeah, I am blanking on his name off the top
because
of my head.
It's something very unique. But when he first comes into the scene, I would almost expect that to almost seem farcical, but it is. I loved that moment when he comes in and that adaptation of it, and it didn't feel like I was just watching them kind of parody what was happening before. I think that I was kind of pulled out of it my first watch because of that, and also because of the voices that they chose for Dorothy Dandridge and Harry Belafonte were so operatic that I it pulled me out a little bit, and I almost kind of would have loved to have seen it with them actually singing the roles.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's especially true now when, like, I'd imagine in the 50s, even though Harry Belafonte, was somewhat known, right? You could have passed, but now we all know Harry Belafonte's voice so well that it's like if you were watching like a Paul McCartney concert and Bob Dylan's voice came out. You'd be like, that's not what you sound like. I know very well what you sound like, and that is not it. So it's right. It's additionally jarring there. I also want to say, Amanda, you mentioned the boxer and him doing that song, and I have to say, on my most recent rewatch, the minute the boxer pulls up in his car and starts to do one of the songs from Carmen that everybody knows, right?
Mhm.
And I felt like the minute he does the stand up and fight, boy, till you hear the bell, from a distance, miles away, I heard Tom quietly go, hell yeah. I just feel like that happened at that moment. I feel like that was exactly
Yeah.
what occurred. Am I wrong, Tom? Or was that your reaction in that moment?
I mean, that's why one of the many reasons I like this movie is that there's just that just like dudes being dudes and like lower class, just like, oh, here's a boxer, and people are just like looking to meet the boxer, and the boxer's kind of a shithead, and he's like just looking to get laid, and he's just threatening to fire. It's like, yeah, it's just dude stuff, just guys just being dudes, and in the streets of Chicago and whatnot and all that. It's like, yeah, this is cool. Yeah, I like this.
I think that one of the key points where it really differentiates, and listen, this is just based on the one production of Carmen that I saw. I know that there are tons of productions where the actors and the director can take it in a different direction. But in the production that I saw, and in the original source material, Cindy Lou's character is really someone that Joe's mother wants him to marry. There isn't this strong profession of love between the two of them the way that there is in this musical, which I think changes that landscape and sort of how you look at those characters' decisions. In the opera, it can very much be taken as, well, he's going to marry her because he might as well, because it's what his mother wants. He starts this out saying, there's nobody else like you in the world. You remind me of exactly the kind of woman. Let's run away and get married tonight. It is completely on him. And for that to switch wildly upon being seduced by Carmen, I found to be a really interesting decision. Because, I don't know that I would call anything that happens in this film love. I think I call it obsession, and as we said earlier, passion. But still a fun watch.
Well, what I found so fascinating about this movie is that it is one of the most bone deep, cynical movies I've watched in a long time. It's very colorful, and it's very energetic and very fun to watch, but where you just realize, oh, other than Cindy Lou, everybody in this movie is a piece of shit. It has it looks at everybody poorly. It's anti-soldier, and like all the soldiers we meet, not just Joe, but the other guys. The sergeant that he beats up, who basically tries to fuck over his relationship with Cindy Lou, and then is like, "Hey, I'm gonna bully you. You can't beat me up. I'm a lieutenant." And it's just like, and so on that aspect of this, like this weird anti-soldier thing, it almost feels like by switching it to him being a soldier, it gives him this thing of like, soldiers can't think for themselves. They need authority. They need to be told what to do. And they kind of just go with whatever's in front of them. So like Cindy Lou was just like the girl that was in front of him, and he sings, "Yo, you remind me of my mom," and that was good. My mom was good, so that should be good for me. And then the second he gets trapped in a fucking shack overnight with Carmen, it's just like, oh well, this is good sex. I like this. I'll just do this now, without even like the forethought of like the consequences of that could even possibly happen. Like, it's like, bro, come on. She literally just hopped on a train before all of this to escape from you. Why do you think she wouldn't run away while you were sleeping? It's just like
Well, and
he can't see what's in front of him. He can only see what's in front of him, I should say.
And it speaks to a thing that, like, it still goes on now. Like, we all know, and this is not, this is not shaming anybody or disparaging anybody, but like when you know people who have been in the military for a while, right? And they talk about like the new 18-year-olds that come in and they're like, listen, this is like your buddy. This is your first time away from home. You are going to go out to a bar. There is going to be a girl. She's going to be about your age, maybe a little older. And she's going to tell you, I really like you. I'm going to, we're going to do stuff. Like, we're going to go out and party and do all kinds of stuff that you did not do back home in, middle of nowhere. And if you marry me, you get to live off base. So, and you can absolutely buy a car with a really terrible loan that you'll be trapped in for the rest of your life. Like, they still warn about that. And it's not, and to be clear, like, I think the thing that I really appreciate about Carmen Jones and the arc in that, right, is that it's very easy when you're making these kind of stories to do the thing that a lot of people do, which is like, well, this woman knows exactly what she's doing. And the beauty of the arc that Carmen Jones has in this,
she doesn't,
is that she does not everybody's trying to warn Joe, like, buddy, don't get with her. You're playing with fire. But she's also playing with fire. And I think there's this thing that happens a lot where I think a lot of people get kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Like, I've certainly known people in my life who have that very Brett Ashley from Sun Also Rises kind of energy, right? Where like I flit about to the, the Matador and the writer and this and that. But there's that one person where it's like, oh, I think I can just flit about to this person. And they just match their level of self-destructive. And it snowballs. I've known people like that. I've been people like that. Like, there is this thing.
I am people like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, but there is that thing where the Carmen Joneses of the world, and that's what I love about her arc, is that it's not that she's not in control, right? She certainly is at the beginning. It is the fact that you see throughout the movie as it moves on, she doesn't realize until it's too late that she's lost control. And that's what makes it also tragic.
And I think one of the brilliant aspects of this movie is that, like I said, it's a very cynical movie, but it portrays Joe and Carmen as both, they're bad people. But not in a cartoonish typical movie way. Joe's a bad guy because, he fucking loses his mind and he kills Carmen. Obviously, that's a bad thing. But you see that he's just a simple kind of dopey guy who's kind of easily led along by his nose. And once things get out of his control, he literally just doesn't know how to react. And he's a soldier. The only thing he knows how to do is to react violently. And Carmen, she's not destroying Joe's life on purpose, but she does destroy his life and kind of carelessly is just like, oh, well, we had some fun. So, deuces, like, I'll see you around, like, cool, bye, like, okay. That's like a more realistic way of how you like those kind of relationships or people are, where they're not typically out to destroy your life and destroy your soul. It's just there's a selfishness to them that blinds them to, well, you kind of ruined this guy's life and now you're just throwing him away.
It looked like you were starting to say something, Amanda, so I want to make sure you get that.
Yeah, so I watched this movie 3 times in a very short time span, and I came away with, I think, almost each time slightly different interpretations of what was happening. The first time I'm watching it, right in that first song, she talks about, if you play hard to get, I might like you. And really, in that opening scene, Joe is the only one not giving her his full unadulterated attention. And do I think that is maybe part of what makes her chase after him so hard? 100%. I think it's part of what makes her so angry when he gets out of, I forget the right term for it, but when he's released and he meets her outside of the club and he's like, I have to go back to training. Yeah, the stockade. He's going to go to flight school. And so I think that some of it comes from that. But I do think that there is a genuine care there. And then, I mean, I think that in some of my watches, I take it as like, you're throwing him away. But I think that she's also been very clear that she doesn't like to be trapped. She doesn't like to set down roots. She's also very superstitious. And I think that there are certain moments where she has read her cards and she sees that she is potentially on a path that spells death and destruction for her and everything that she cares about and the way that she wants to live her life. And there's a certain part of that I think causes her further to push him away. And especially because last night when I was rewatching it, when he is singing to her in that closet before, he ultimately kills her. And this is credit to Dorothy Dandridge and her acting. There's just an emotion in her eyes that maybe wants to give this relationship another shot, but she can't do it for whatever reason she can, whether it's her effect on his life, whether it's what she's read in the cards for hers. And so it's interesting because I to have watched it 3 different times and come away with 3 different takes about how this movie went and what it meant to those characters.
But you see,
really fascinating.
But see, again, I don't think that necessarily negates like the point I make is all 3 things you came away with is just she like her selfish desires, her views, like she's only seeing beyond herself. Mm-hmm. She can't see him. She doesn't want to be trapped. Okay, well, you did convince the guy to run away with you to Chicago, knowing he wouldn't be able to leave the hotel room because the MPs are following. You read your death card and you decide you're never going to go back to this guy again and just flit about with a boxer and just have the hoity-toity rich people experience. Again, ignoring that you left this guy with literally no money in a hovel while the military police are out to get him. And it's just, like she's super. It's that, but that's why I think it's good is that, and better than so. Like if she was doing this on purpose just to fuck with him, or like there was a malice to her. It's not that there's a malice to her. It's that these are 2 people that can't see beyond the tip of their nose. And as much as she may genuinely care about him, she said from the beginning, I don't like being trapped. So there is an inherently selfish thing going on with her of she's never going to be trapped. No matter what, if she loves this guy, there's only a certain distance she's willing to go for him. And, like even the scene where she's like, he's like saying like, well, how did you get all this? And she's like, oh, well, I'm not going to tell you. What, you think I'm doing something wrong? It's like, well, yeah, now I do. Where'd you get the money for this? And she's like needling him without realizing she's needling him. And it's like, well, what, like, take a step back and realize you're driving this man fucking crazy. He was straight up just like, I'll go to jail. It's fine. Like, I beat the guy up. And she's like, no, come to Chicago with me. And just the second they get to Chicago is just immediately like, well, I don't like being trapped.
It's also the thing, like, obviously this takes it to such an extreme, right? But it's the odd thing of, with any relationship, with modern relationships, what you see is like, for whatever reason, we are all, Amanda mentions that line about, if you play hard to get, I might be interested. That's a game that a lot of people play. A lot of us play in the early stages, right? Yep. Of any kind of relationship, any kind of courtship, flirtation, or kind of setting up these like hoops for this person to jump through in order to sort of prove themselves, right? But that is only sustainable for so long, right? And I think what you are seeing in this case, in a much very extreme version of it, right? And obviously you can chalk some of this up. I'm going to use an outdated term, but it's, it's a Freudian term. You can chalk some of this up to like the Madonna whore complex kind of thing, which wasn't being talked about when Carmen was written, but was obviously being talked about by the time the movie was out. And not just in what Cindy Lou, oh, you're reminding me of my mom, and Carmen Jones, what they represent, but also the expectations for Carmen, right? Which is like, oh, you're supposed to be this hot to trot gal, the more the car bumps, the more I bump, or whatever her line is, things like that. But later, you're supposed to be, my woman at home, right? But similarly, there is also this element of like the tricks that she's used to deploying. Like Tom mentions well, I don't need to tell you where I got this from. Why do you think I'm doing something wrong? That trick 100% works for her in the relationship she's only been in for like a week. That's not going to work after a certain period of time. And, the thing it reminds me of, and I'm going to evoke this, we are all of Long Island origin, right? We all have Long Island in us. So I'm going to make the most Long Island reference, but it does feel true in this case, which is a much minimized version. Every one of us, when we were kids, we all heard Billy Joel's Scenes from an Italian Restaurant every time we went anywhere. But you do hit about like 20 years old and go, yeah, we do all know the Brenda and Eddie, don't we? Like we literally all do know that one couple out of high school that everybody, like when prom rolled around, was like, good for them. I bet they're going to be together forever. And by the time you hit 19, went, shit, are they going to be together forever? That's not good. There's no world. These two are not good for each other. They're going to destroy each other. Obviously, like most times it does not end in a dramatic strangulation a la Carmen Jones, but it is this thing of like, we do know, we've all encountered like those situations of like, they're the people who were fun. They were always fun. And you think they're going to be fun together, but instead they end up getting stuck in this vortex that it's just destructive,
Well, it's funny because it's not even, in this case, it's not even the two people that are fun, because this really is quite a case of the opposites attract. It is just, it's passions that, in this case, the opposite attracts passion in a way that he's never felt, because if Cindy Lou is the kind of girl he's been like, he's okay with marrying, clearly this is not a guy who's just getting his rocks off every time he gets a leave from the base. And for her, it's a different kind of passion, because no judgment here. She gets around. She's a girl, gets around. Everybody, that's part of the story. She gets around. But in this case, it's that this is not the normal guy that she goes for, that this is almost a buttoned up, honorable guy. But from personal experience, opposites attracting in a strictly passionate relationship do not work out. So yeah, I think
Amanda, you look like you want to. I'm sorry, just at this point, Amanda, you look like you want to say something, and quite frankly, I just want to be real. Like Tom and I have both admitted to our faults as men. So if you want to just take us to the woodshed even further, with your next comment, go for it. But no, you look like you wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to echo what Tom said. I think that because they start at these polar opposites, but then because of that, they actually start getting pulled across, and then he ends up the one who is, quite frankly, obviously driven insane by all of this, acting unpredictably and wild and, literally strangling someone. And then you have her, and she's kind of made peace with what's going to happen at the end of this. And I like that. And I think that, Tom, you were absolutely right. None of the three interpretations or varied ones that I pulled out of this, it doesn't negate what you were saying before. In the opera, I very much took away from it that Carmen did not care about, in the opera, it's Jose. Didn't really care about him, kind of mocks him throughout the whole thing and is stringing him along. And I think that there's something very human about the fact that we can look at this and take it all kinds of different ways and wonder what is going through their head. And if they, if this is love, is she playing with him a bit? Are these things happening? And I really appreciated that about her. And I appreciated that there was like a depth brought to her performance because of that. Like, it wasn't just her going, having a lot of fun playing with people, leaving a trail of broken hearts. Like, this was about very firmly just in her identity of who she was as a woman, not wanting to be controlled, not wanting to have to answer to anybody. But at the same time, I feel like I couldn't help but realize, like, everybody is trying to play Carmen a little bit, even her friends. Her friends are trying to play her to come to Chicago. They're trying to play her to leave Joe behind because it's their meal ticket. And she is in some ways convinced, because she comes back from seeing them after getting everything. Joe is on her case about where she's been, who she's been talking to, what she's been doing. and it is suddenly suffocating to her. And I think that if they didn't have certain motives in wanting her to leave him and come stay with them so they could perpetuate this life that they were living, maybe it doesn't escalate as quickly as it does, or deteriorate, for a better term.
And yeah, all of that I think is what makes this movie so special, is that, you know, musicals can tend to get live in a broader world in terms of characterizations and character arcs and all of that. And this really feels like it could have just been an Otto Preminger drama without musical numbers. Like, that's how well-rounded and how well thought out and deeply, you know, cared for these characters are and performed, that you could cut out all the musical numbers and all the musical numbers, like, just add more scenes of just the characters interacting and all of that. And I do think kind of the ultimate tragedy of the movie is that there was never going to be a happy ending for these two. I think even if because I want to get this guy's name right because I love it, Husky Miller. What a gentleman. And I don't mean that because what an asshole. But he is a boxer, and thus I must stand. Like, even if he didn't come in, or her friends weren't like trying to basically pimp her off to him, she was like, the second he beat up the sergeant and they had to go on the run, like she said from the beginning, I don't like being trapped. There was no good outcome for these two. And even if he didn't beat her up, what was the end goal for him? He wants a housewife. He just wants someone to control. He wants a Cindy Lou. Oh, crap. He wants a Cindy Lou in the streets.
I knew it was coming.
He wants a Carmen Jones in the streets. Listen, we've known each other long enough. Sometimes I can surprise you, and sometimes you could read me like a book.
It was inevitable. It was inevitable that exact framing was coming.
It was beautiful.
Hey, listen. Sometimes I know what I'm doing. But yeah, like, no matter what, they as much as like she saw something in him that maybe this could be something different than the usual, like, quick 1 week whatever guy she goes with and then dumps and leaves or whatever. The true tragedy is he was probably the most, you know, extreme example of the kind of guy who is going to try to control her. He's a fucking military man. His entire, like, not only a military man, he wants to be a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is not a guy that's all about just, you know, freewheeling and just like leaving things up in the air. No pun intended, but maybe, I don't know. Control. It's all about control for the guy like that. And that's the ultimate. No matter what was going to happen, the best case scenario was he bangs her out in the shack. They never see each other again. He does his 4 weeks in the brig, and they just go off, and she goes, "Hey, remember that time I banged that sergeant who was trying to arrest me, and then I snuck off in the middle of the night?" And then he goes, "Oh boy, remember when I did 4 weeks for banging a prisoner I was transporting to prison?" Which would have been an interesting subplot in The Last Detail, but that's neither here nor there. Imagine Jack Nicholson trying to fuck Randy Quaid in The Last Detail.
We can't deal with this. Amanda, please keep talking.
Speaking of subplots, I on one of my rewatches during the Troubadour song that Husky sings upon his introduction, I was wondering if they were going to explore a subplot completely outside of the source material, which they did not. But Diane Carroll's character, who is the other friend, during that entire scene, she is acting very much like she is interested in Husky. When Husky is paying attention to Carmen throughout those 2 scenes, she is annoyed by it, and then it never comes up again. And I was almost a little bit disappointed that I wasn't given a little bit more meat on that bone.
I will say I noticed that kind of detail even in like the commissary scene when she's doing habanero or anything like that, which is, it feels like Preminger as a director did that thing that, I'll be honest, when I used to do like crowd scenes with extras when I was making films in college, is the most fun thing to do, which is I'm not just going to tell the extras do whatever you want. We are going to give them each a story, right? Like every side character, you're going to tell them like, here's something you're going to do. Because if you leave somebody to their own devices, right? You know, maybe they'll slack off or maybe they won't do anything. But if you go up to each person, even if you're, you know, just shooting like everybody's sitting in a movie theater, if you go to each person, you explain like, you're on a date with this person. Okay, you're really invested in the movie. Well, you've seen this before. You give them even just that little thing, and the whole scene becomes more dynamic. And one of the things I appreciate about the choreography of this film, in a way, is the fact that it is a remarkably intimate musical in terms of like, you know, the Troubadour song, as you mentioned a minute, like there's very little movement going on. You know, it's him sitting in the car singing, but it feels as dynamic as what other musicals, you know, can only accomplish with, we're going to have 50 extras all dancing, right? It's just because of the way he shoots it, just because of the way he choreographs the camera, choreographs the actors. These numbers all have a power to them, even though the actual like numbers themselves are not being shot or not being choreographed very lavishly, which I really appreciated. I do want to, before we get too crazy, and to keep it again, Meta, you mentioned you have done a bunch of research for this, so I know there's stuff you want to get into, and I want to make sure we get to it.
I mostly got into some information, and it didn't occur during Carmen Jones, but it's Carmen Jones tangential about I'm not even gonna say it. Carmen Jones related. Sorry, guys. It's 9:22. I've been working since 6 a.m. I'm gonna be, you know, I was working until midnight last night.
Gives me a sensation.
I cannot
That's a hard word.
But just who Harry Belafonte was fucking. Which we don't need to get into on this episode. In fact, Mike, I'm begging you to cut that out, because if that ever makes its way to my HR department, that's the when we stop recording thing.
Hell yeah, brother.
I mean, my options are limited, but nevertheless, continue. So, did you have stuff that you wanted to share about like the production of the film, or anything that you came across?
I feel like we covered a lot of it. A lot of it was about Preminger and Dorothy Dandridge and that love affair that they were swept up in.
That chaotic ordeal.
Yeah,
it can only be described as a chaotic ordeal. Now, I will say a bit of a bummer, because quite frankly, if I had to pick a singer and musician who stars in a Preminger film for Preminger to have a steamy, hot love affair with, I personally would have gone with the star of his next film, The Man with the Golden Arm. I want him in a steamy romance with Frank Sinatra, but that's just me. I think that would have been more fun. But, you know, listen, we take what we can get.
It seems like two mercurial men in one relationship. I don't know, that has Carmen Jones's plot written all over it. But who strangles who in the closet is the actual question.
It's Frank Sinatra. Frank gets somebody else to strangle Otto Preminger.
Yeah.
Believe me, Sinatra had no shortage of men he could turn to if somebody needed to get strangled. He had that covered.
He knew a guy. He knew a guy. He knew a few guys. Some good fellows, if you know what I mean, and I think you do.
The last thing I want to make sure we call out before all of this, before we get too into this, or wind down, I should say, because we talked about the semi-independent nature of this thing came together. We could get into the details of that, but it's also worth noting, this is the first opening title sequence from Saul Bass.
It's his first?
Yes.
I saw his name in the credits.
Yeah,
but
this is
his first.
This is the first Saul Bass title sequence. How crazy is that? And he would work with Preminger again, including with the Man with the Golden Arm, the Frank Sinatra heroin addiction drama. But yeah, this is the beginning of Saul Bass. This is just, it really is a thing that when you read about the production, right, and you read about like Preminger being like, listen, I've got enough clout to do what I want, and like no one wants to make this movie. Fox is finally willing to like I'll produce it myself and they'll distribute it and all of that. And you hear about the cast of like people just starting out, and oh, this is the first Saul Bass. Everything you read about this film coming together, and the fact that it did not, as Tom, as you alluded, like end up being the most influential thing. It's all if you don't watch it and you just read about it, you expect this movie to be a lot scrappier and shabbier than it is. The fact that it's a kind of perfectly constructed work on such a big budget and it looks so good, it doesn't make sense for the circumstances of its production. And conversely, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's
very odd, but that just goes to show, man, if you're a good filmmaker, no matter what limitations you're working with, you can make something feel bigger, even if you're working with something smaller. Because, I know you were going through, like, whatever, a week or two ago, watching, like, fucking Dr. Dolittle and shit like that. And, those, the end era 60s musical fucking shit where it's like, oh, 3 hours and intermission and Technicolor and all that. And it's like, that's what people want, right? And it's like, give them the biggest budgets in the world. Here's Camelot. And you go, oh, this sucks. Guys had a lot of money to make a movie that just fucking sucked. And yet Preminger is out here just flopping his Savalas dick around and just being like, I am going to roundhouse kick all of you in the fucking shins.
Well, it's also funny to consider, like, so this is the second film that Fox makes in Cinemascope and Deluxe Color, right? The first one was The Robe, the big biblical epic. And there's a real sliding doors moment of knowing, like, they can either do more of The Robe type movies or more Carmen Joneses. And obviously we know the reality where they went, Bible sells, huh? What if Bible? What if our IP for the next 10 years is Bible? But the reality is go the other way.
What if there was a son of God?
Yeah. And what if there was a guy riding chariots who met him at some point, kinda, I guess. Really, it's just insane that Ben-Hur is just Bible fanfic. And self-insert fanfic. It's very weird. The only other thing
weirder that they remade Ben-Hur a third time.
Oh yeah. The only other thing I want to note before we fully
wind down, we let that happen.
The only other thing I want to fully note is at one point there is a line in this film, she's what fellas back home call a hot bundle. And I firmly believe we need to bring the term a hot bundle back. I feel like that just, you tell me you don't want to call somebody a hot bundle, you don't want to be called a hot bundle, that works. I'm all for it,
That's fine.
It's a hot bundle of shit.
Just Husky's various nicknames for Carmen. I was like, yeah, let's bring these back for people catcalling, because, like, we definitely have lost some of the poetry.
Heat wave. Get me heat wave.
If someone called me heat wave, I'd be like, yeah, fuck yeah. I am Washington, D.C. in the summer.
So, winding down as we always do, Tom, how do you think Carmen Jones fared at the Academy Awards that year?
Probably Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actress. I don't think it won anything.
Well, Tom, I'm sorry to say you're not totally right there, because you have to remember, as great a film as this is, it's the Academy in the 50s, and the movie was full of black people.
True.
So they're not nominating that for Best Picture, my friend. No. Let's talk about the films that were nominated, all as white as can be. See, it wasn't nominated for Best Picture, but the nominees were, and we just talked about this here recently.
You pronounced the H. I'm sorry. I hate that you pronounced it.
It was not nominated for Best Picture. The nominees were The Cane Mutiny, The Country Girl, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, Three Coins in the Fountain, and the winner, On the Waterfront. As I noticed...
Sorry. I was just going to say, all of those titles sound super white. So, yeah. Sounds about white.
Now, I'm going to mention, I'm going to save Best Actress for last because this is the most maddening category. But because I want to actually pull up the entire list of nominees to see how angry Tom gets. So it was nominated for Best Scoring for a Musical Picture, lost to Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And it was nominated for Dorothy Dandridge for Best Actress, which, as I noted up top, is the first time a black performer was nominated in the category of Best Actress. Now, here's the thing. This is egregious how this Oscar actually gets given out, because the winner is Grace Kelly for the movie The Country Girl, which is an
Sure.
okay movie. Tom, I want to read you the list of the other nominees. So now already, I know you haven't seen The Country Girl, but knowing that Dorothy Dandridge got, beat out for Carmen Jones, right? The other nominees are Judy Garland in A Star is Born, Audrey Hepburn in Sabrina, and Jane Wyman in Magnificent Obsession. Those are 4 iconic actress performances in 1 year, and it goes to Grace Kelly for The Country Girl.
Bro, I'm going home. Fuck that.
Like,
so stupid.
That is, like, because I look at it, obviously, out of those, I do give it to Dandridge. I think she's phenomenal in this film, especially, where she was at in her career. But it really is a thing of, like, if we were doing the same conversation and I went, well, Dandridge got beaten out by Judy Garland in A Star is Born, you go, okay. It's literally like we were talking about before with the Emma Stone, Lily Gladstone thing, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, fine, I see that, right? Okay, Jane Wyman in Magnificent Obsession. Okay, I can let that go, right? I can swing that. But that's just the one where you're like, how? How did we do that?
That's it's honestly it's like fucking Renee Zellweger winning for the Judy Garland movie.
Of Judy, of course. Well, yeah, but not so much, because what else was that year? Like, I seem to remember that being a year that we all just went, I guess.
No, we all kind of just resigned, I guess, because it's like, well, I guess we just figure, like, I guess there's a narrative now. But I could throw a fucking stone at an orphanage and find a better performance than fucking Renee goddamn Zellweger's Judy Garland.
Now, it's worth noting, as I feel like I say this every episode when you say things like this, it is also worth noting, Tom, you have not seen Judy.
Listen, I'm an American.
So
I'm allowed to have an opinion.
Amanda, thank you very much for joining us for Carmen Jones. This is fun for us because, it's the first time we've had you on for a non-politically oriented film, right? Yeah. And also your first time doing an episode as part of the team.
Member of the team. Yeah. Wait, before you continue complimenting me and thanking me for being here, I do want to point out that year also at the Golden Globes for Best Newcomer, our boy who played Husky did in fact win for his portrayal in Carmen Jones in the now defunct category of Best Male Newcomer.
Which is cool, because now Best Male Newcomer is, I don't know what they give for Best Actor in TV. I feel like now the Golden Globes just give whatever the hot new show is, like Best Actor and Actress and stuff. So I think it's the same thing. But Amanda, thank you. We're so glad you did this, your first episode as part of the team. And because you are part of the team, you're going to be in the next segment as well. So everybody, Amanda included, stick around. We'll be right back with our picks for the National Film Registry.
The National Film Registry isn't some fixed object, frozen in time. It's always growing, adding new titles every year. These annual selections are made by the National Film Preservation Board, with members like Martin Scorsese, Alfre Woodard, and Leonard Maltin, and representatives from organizations like the Academy, the DGA, and the AFI coming together to debate and decide. But they don't just pull titles out of thin air. They pull from the public, people like you and us, who can submit their nominations for the registry in a form on the Library of Congress's website. What we do, at the end of each episode, is have Mike and Tom pick films not yet in the registry that they feel should be, inspired by that day's topic. At the end of each season, those films will be formally submitted to the National Film Registry for consideration, on behalf of You're Missing Out. Here are today's picks.
So I had to go sort of a circuitous way for this pick to figure out where exactly I was going with this. As I alluded to in the episode, I watched a bunch of these little Soundies, these short, sort of proto music videos that Dorothy Dandridge did. And there were a ton of these, and they're fascinating. There's some of these great artists at the time, and it's, seeing all these great Black artists on film in ways that they weren't otherwise. Not all of them hold up very well. I'm not going to deny it, but, they need to be preserved. They're a fascinating thing. But the question was, how do you pick just one? And I discovered a film that actually was a collection of these put together into feature length. It was called Ebony Parade. It featured interstitials by Mantan Moreland, and it had a lot of the great Black artists of the time doing these early Soundies films. And I thought, well, that would be tremendous. Like, that obviously needs to be preserved. That's so important. Only to find out that that film is entirely lost. And that really struck me, that this important film, this 90-minute, I think, feature that was a compilation of all of these great Black artists of their era is just gone. And maybe the individual Soundies exist, but that the film as a whole was gone. And that actually brought to mind a different film that was very recently rediscovered. That, even though I started from the place of a Dorothy Dandridge film, it ended up bringing me to a Harry Belafonte film. A film that I'm going to talk about this a bit. It's called Nation Time from 1972. And it just recently got a 4K restoration, I think about 2 years ago or so. And I want to just kind of, to explain the significance of this, I'm just going to read Kino Lorber's description of it, because Kino Lorber was the one who put out this 4K restoration. Best known for his avant-garde meta-documentary Symbiocytotaxoplasm, which is in the registry. William Greaves was also the director of over 100 documentary films, the majority focused on African-American history, politics, and culture. Nation Time is a report on the National Black Political Convention held in Gary, Indiana in 1972, a historic event that gathered Black voices from across the political spectrum, among them Jesse Jackson, Dick Gregory, Coretta Scott King, Dr. Betty Shabazz, Richard Hatcher, Amari Baraka, Charles Diggs, Isaac Hayes, Richard Roundtree, and H. Carl McCall. Narrated by Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte, the film was considered too militant for television broadcast at the time, and has since circulated only as an edited 58-minute version. But Kino Lorber's 4K restoration, with funding from Jane Fonda and the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, it was a restoration done by Indie Collect, returned the film to its original 80-minute length and visual quality. It's one of those things where, like, even before I saw it, just seeing that list of names, Jesse Jackson, Dick Gregory, Coretta Scott King, Betty Shabazz, Richard Roundtree, and it's narrated by Poitier and Harry Belafonte. Like, especially for film nerds like Tom and I, like, you hear that title, you hear that list, and you're like, I would know if that movie existed. I would know if that event happened, but we don't. And it kind of reminded me, obviously this film is not eligible for the registry yet, but it kind of reminded me of like what happened when Questlove put out Summer of Soul, where he was like, did you know there was this concert with this lineup? And a lot of us just went, I would have known if that happened. You have that feeling. And then I watched it, when Kino Lorber put it up, and it was a tremendously affecting documentary, even though what it is depicting is not a particularly significant cultural event. And that's part of the intrigue of it, is to watch a documentary that seems so confident that the thing it is capturing is a thing of great import. And then it's just sort of lost in the history books. It's a little bit like, I would imagine, for those of us, our age, we at least have like vague memories of the Million Man March, right? And how that was meant to be this just like earth-shattering event at the time. And I would imagine it's the same thing as like if you show somebody who's 15 years old Spike Lee's Get on the Bus, and they're like, so was this like totally fiction? It's like, no, this was a thing that happened. Like, it was we all remember it vividly. So all that, I just think that we talk a lot, I think, honestly, I was thinking about it in terms too of like when we do the registry, the new registry inductees every year, like every year there's at least one film, a documentary of some major event that we all go, huh, wow, that sounds interesting, and I had no idea that existed. Nation Time is 100% one of those. So in all that, Nation Time is from 1972 is my pick for the National Film Registry.
So I'm about to make a weird, wild choice here, but it makes sense in my head, and obviously that only means it makes sense objectively. I'm just, nothing wrong with this brain. So I was thinking about this movie in terms of the tragic romance at the center of it. And that's one way you could have done it. But then an aspect of it that started itching at the back of my brain was the idea of that it is essentially a remake, taking an older story and transposing it into a new form, keeping the same basic idea, but being something completely new. Carmen Jones is Carmen, but not really. It's doing its own thing. As Amanda pointed out, that there are some plenty of differences to make this its own thing, and Preminger and company give it its own down to earth humanity. So I was thinking of those two things, and a movie came to mind, which, unless you're as wet-brained, movie poisoned as me, probably wouldn't think about this in connection to Carmen Jones, but it is a remake that keeps the same basic idea, but does it in a completely different just world and form and style, and it's a whole different thing. And at the center of it is a tragic romance. I could see the look on that motherfucking Mike's face. I wonder if he knows what I'm about to say, but the movie I'm about to pick is David Cronenberg's The Fly. I don't know why it was the first movie that came into my head when thinking about this movie, because it really it's doing a lot of the same shit in terms of remaking an older movie an older story, in this case a movie, transporting it into a new form and structure and turning it into something different and a little more human, but a little more also just grand and theatrical with the body horror elements of it. And the fact that it turns the movie into a tragic romance between Goldblum and Gina Davis, I think it makes it one of the most unique and emotional and hard-hitting horror movies just of all time, not just of the 80s fucking makeup effects era, which again, the makeup effects, the way the music in Carmen Jones is great, the makeup effects in The Fly are just unbelievable. But just it's a unique movie. Even in the face of it being a remake, it just feels so unique and singular to its creator. It could never have been made in any other time. Like, I can't even begin to fucking fathom someone saying, like, let's make another Fly, because they made a sequel to The Fly, which was fine, but really just showed, like, that movie was a lightning in a bottle. Yeah, I don't know. It just, in my mind, I wanted to find an avenue to. There's similarities in the macro level of the remake tragic romance thing, but on the micro is so fundamentally different from Carmen Jones. But I do think the soul of what the two are doing are very similar. And me and Mike talked about this a few weeks ago, where that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not in the registry, and that's fucking crazy. It's crazy that The Fly is not in the registry. That's one of those horror movies that even like not horror people tend to love. So it's shocking that, like, because I know a lot of Cronenberg's movies tend to be Canadian productions, so it kind of makes it like, oh, do we put it in? But this is a 20th Century Fox movie produced by Mel Brooks. Like, this is an American production, and arguably his best movie. Like, so let's represent Cronenberg in this fucking registry, guys. Like, and fuck it. I wanted to do my typical Tom Galaxy Brain bullshit with this movie, so let's go. David Cronenberg's The Fly. That's my pick.
Well, out of the three of us who are cinephiles, who host a regular podcast, and who is just three grumpy cats stacked in a trench coat pretending that he belongs here, I don't think that I went as galaxy-brained or as research in depth as either of you. I was focusing in on modernizations of classic stories for this one, and there are tons. But for this one, it's interesting because in comparison, now that I am much older, Carmen Jones, it was the opposite. I was in love with the source material. I came into this movie. It absolutely blew me away, exceeded my expectations. But when I think back to, we're going to go to late 90s Amanda, movies that altered her brain chemistry, that were solid retellings of, a classic story. I'm going to throw out 10 Things I Hate About You, which is one of my favorite retellings of Taming of the Shrew. And my brain chemistry is forever altered by Heath Ledger singing and dancing across a football field. And I was thinking about it just in terms of the way that I connected with that, and then later it connected me to the source material when I actually got to that, when I was learning my love of literature, when I was learning my love of Shakespeare. And so kind of the opposite journey that I had in terms of entering into Carmen Jones. But yes, 10 Things I Hate About You is my registry pick.
Next week,
it is just us, and we are talking about Bruce Bailey's Castro Street.
And it's just transporting yourself to a different place in a different time, and in a very memory forward way is how I would put it. Putting yourself into someone else's memory of a specific time.
You're Missing Out is a production of Neon Night Media. It's hosted by Mike Natale and Tom Lorenzo. The show is produced by Kyle Lampar and edited by Mike Natale and Kyle Lampar. More information about our hosts and guests are in the show notes. Thank you to Amanda Rush for our social media, and all of you for checking us out.
If you're listening right now or want to take the show on the go, every episode is available as an audio podcast. Follow You're Missing Out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please leave a review and a rating. It helps folks find the show.
Want to watch the show or watch some of the films along with us? Great, that's why we're doing this. Don't leave us alone out here. Check out our YouTube channel. We've got video versions of every episode, uploads of some of the National Film Registry titles we're discussing, commentary tracks, and live streams. And once a month, I'll be uploading some content that's exclusive to the YouTube channel. So be sure to click subscribe and hit that little bell to be notified as soon as new stuff goes up. Because, let's be fucking real, I ain't sticking to a goddamn schedule.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
And we'll see you next time.
And you'll see us next time, because we don't watch you, you're watching us.